We do know from tracking devices that they dive down and kind of hang out in one area for a while and then come back up.
There is a sound coming from a mile beneath the surface of the Caribbean Sea. It has been there for millions of years. It travels through cold, dark water at 4 times the speed of sound. And for the entire history of human civilization, every war, every invention, every empire that rose and collapsed, we heard it and called it noise. We were wrong. In 2024, an MIT research team fed 9,000 recordings of that sound into an AI system originally built to crack military-grade encrypted codes. The algorithm ran, the team waited, and when the output appeared on screen, the room went completely silent. Not because of what they expected to find, but because of what they had no framework to explain.
So why sperm whales? And this is the animal that they have this ability to make noise and echolocate underwater.
Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to be asking yourself a question that scientists in that room are still struggling to answer.
Breakthrough for scientists after they had a 20-minute conversation with a humpback whale.
A question that doesn't just change marine biology, it changes what it means to be human. The accidental discovery here is how the most significant scientific breakthrough of the decade started. Not with a plan, not with a hypothesis, with a door left open. David Gruber is a marine biologist. In 2017, he's in his office playing back recordings he collected in the Caribbean while studying jellyfish. Not whales, jellyfish. The sounds drifting out of his speakers are sperm whale clicks, rapid-fire burst patterns these animals use to navigate and communicate in the deep ocean. Researchers had always dismissed them with a shrug. Underwater jackhammers, they called them. Functional noise, nothing more. Across the hall, MIT cryptographer Shai Goldwasser hears something through the open door. She stops walking, she tilts her head, and she stands there with the kind of stillness that only comes from spending decades finding hidden structure inside apparent chaos. Because that is literally what she does for a living. She breaks encrypted codes, she finds the mathematical skeleton inside things that look random. She walks into Gruber's office and says 7 words that change everything. That sounds like Morse code. Have you tried machine learning? Stop right there. Think about what just happened. Sperm whale vocalizations had been cataloged since the 1970s. Researchers had named them, assigned probable functions to them, studied their frequencies and durations. But nobody, not one person in decades of research, had ever thought to run them through the same pattern recognition systems that were at that very moment revolutionizing how humans process language. Why not? Because we had already decided what the sounds were. We had labeled them and filed them away. Assumption is the enemy of discovery, and the scientific community had assumed itself into a box. Goldwasser hadn't. She introduced Gruber to Michael Bronstein, an AI researcher with a specific and radical insight. The same deep learning algorithms powering large language models like ChatGPT don't care what species produce the data. They just need scale. Millions of data points, consistent methodology, identifiable individuals recorded over years. Whale research had none of that.
After our 20-minute period of playbacks was over, we turned off our speaker, and she continued to vocalize back to us, even as she was leaving.
Scattered recordings, small samples, inconsistent methods across dozens of disconnected institutions, which meant if you wanted to build what they were imagining, you had to build it from scratch. In 2020, they did exactly that. Project CETI is born. Project CETI, the Cetacean Translation Initiative, is the most ambitious interspecies communication project in human history. Funded by the TED Audacious Project, partnered with MIT, Harvard, UC Berkeley, and over 15 institutions worldwide. Built on a single, audacious premise that with enough data, enough computing power, and the right minds working together, we might actually be able to understand what whales are saying to each other. The team built a permanent research station in Dominica, a small volcanic island in the eastern Caribbean where generations of sperm whale families have returned to the same waters for decades. These weren't anonymous animals. They were known individuals, photographed, tracked, recognizable by the shape of their flukes, the texture of their voices, the specific click signatures they'd been producing their entire lives. Researchers knew which whales were sisters, which were mothers, which calves had been born in which year to which family. They had the social map. Now they needed the language, they had the technology, they had the funding, they had the animals. What they didn't have, what nobody could have had, was any idea what was about to come out of the data. The first shock, 156 codas. Let me explain how sperm whales actually communicate because this is where things start getting strange. Sperm whales don't sing like humpbacks. They click. Rapid rhythmic sequences called codas. Patterns ranging from 3 to 40 distinct beats that function as the basic unit of sperm whale communication. Before Project CETI launched, scientists had identified 21 different codas, 21 distinct patterns. The working assumption was modest and frankly a little condescending. Each coda probably signaled something simple: danger, food, follow me down. That assumption did not survive first contact with the data. When MIT researchers fed 9,000 audio recordings into their machine learning algorithms, recordings gathered from real whale families in Dominica's waters over years of meticulous fieldwork, the algorithm processed the files and returned a result that stopped every person in the room cold. The whales weren't using 21 codas, they were using 156. Take a moment, let that settle. But here's what made it truly staggering. Those 156 codas weren't simple on-off signals. They had internal structure, tempo variations, rhythm changes, extra clicks woven in as what researchers now call ornamental elements, subtle, modulations that shifted the meaning of a coda, the way tone of voice shifts the meaning of a sentence in human speech. The same coda delivered differently meant something different. Context mattered. Delivery mattered. The relationship between speaker and listener mattered. The AI had found what researchers now call the sperm whale phonetic alphabet, a finite set of building blocks combining into patterns of potentially infinite variety. Does that structure sound familiar to you? It should, because human language works exactly the same way. English runs on 44 phonemes, 44 distinct sound units. From those 44 building blocks, we construct millions of words, billions of sentences, every idea any English speaker has ever expressed or will ever express. Small parts, infinite arrangements, rules governing what can follow what. The sperm whale system works the same way. Dr. Daniela Rosler from MIT told reporters directly, "Our results show there is much more complexity than previously believed. This is challenging the current state-of-the-art of beliefs about the animal world." That was the first shock. The second one was worse. The second shock. Vowels in the deep linguist Gaspar Bejarano at UC Berkeley had one job inside Project CETI, one specific, narrow, deeply technical job: analyze the acoustic properties of individual whale clicks at a resolution nobody had attempted before. Not just pattern and sequence, but what was happening inside each individual click. Frequency, resonance, the geometry of the sound itself as it moved through water. He sat with the spectrograms for a long time. He didn't say anything to anyone at first. What he found made him question everything linguistics had taught him about what separates human language from every other form of animal communication. The whales were producing vowel sounds, specifically an ah vowel, like the A in father, and an E vowel, like the E in sea. And beyond that, they were producing diphthongs, gliding combinations of vowels that shift mid-sound, the way the sound in the word boy moves from one position to another in a single continuous motion. Not two sounds, one sound that moves. Read that again. Let it land. Sperm whales living in complete darkness a mile beneath the surface of the Caribbean Sea have independently evolved vocal structures that mirror the defining features of human speech. Not as a rough analogy, not approximately. The acoustic signatures match. Now here is where this stops being surprising and starts being genuinely unsettling. Vowels are what separate human language from almost all other animal communication. Birds chirp, dogs bark, dolphins whistle. But humans modulate airflow through a complex vocal tract to create precise frequency patterns. And those patterns, those vowels, are the load-bearing architecture of every word we speak. That capacity was supposed to be ours alone. One of the last remaining pillars of human uniqueness. And here's the part that nobody was prepared for. Sperm whales don't have vocal cords. They produce their clicks through a completely different biological system. Nasal passages, air sacs, specialized fatty tissues in the forehead called the spermaceti organ. Different machinery, different evolutionary history, completely independent path, same destination. As Bejarano put it, in the past, researchers thought of whale communication as a kind of Morse code. However, this paper shows that their calls are more like very, very slow vowels. This suggests a complexity that approaches human language. Approaches. That word is doing a lot of work, because the implication behind it is enormous. Grammar, context, and the structure of dialogue. Here's what makes this stranger still. The whales don't just possess a phonetic system, they use it contextually. The same whale produces different codas depending on who it's talking to, what behavior it's engaged in, and what's happening in the water around it. That isn't random signal variation. That is pragmatics, the branch of linguistics concerned with how context shapes meaning. That is grammar operating the way grammar operates. That is language. Let me make this concrete. Researchers have observed specific codas appearing consistently in specific social situations and nowhere else. A coda produced between a mother and her calf during nursing does not appear in the same form during a group hunt. The coda used when two adult females greet each other after a long separation is not the coda used when the same two animals are coordinating direction. The system adjusts to situation. That is not a signal system, that is communication with register, the same sophistication humans use when we speak differently to our bosses than to our best friends. Shane Guerrero has spent 13 years on a research vessel off Dominica, watching specific whale families that he knows by name. When he talks about what he observes, he's not speaking from a conference room or from a published paper. He's speaking from years of sitting on the water before dawn, watching the surface for the V-shaped blow. That means a family is coming up. He describes watching a mother hand her calf over to what can only be called a babysitter whale, exchanging vocalizations before heading down to the deep ocean to feed. He describes conversations that last an hour, multiple whales clicking in overlapping sequences, voices weaving across each other through the water, exchanges that have turns, rhythm, the recognizable structure of dialogue between individuals who know each other well. It's hard not to see cousins playing while chatting, he says, or to not see moms hand a calf over to a babysitter and exchange a few words before heading out the door, so to speak, to go eat in the deep ocean. In sperm whale society, apparently, it is not rude to speak at the same time. But the conversations have rhythm. They have the recognizable architecture of dialogue between people, animals, who know each other well, who have history together, who share information that only the two of them understand. What are those conversations about? Nobody knows yet. But the next discovery changes what that question even means, because it tells you how much brain power is behind them. The largest brains on Earth. Sperm whales have the largest brains of any animal that has ever lived on this planet. Larger than elephants, larger than blue whales, which are themselves the largest animals alive. 6 times heavier than human brains. Dense with neural tissue organized in structures that neuroscientists are still working to fully understand. Brain tissue is the most metabolically expensive material in biology. The human brain consumes 20% of our body's energy while accounting for only 2% of our body weight. Evolution does not build and maintain expensive structures without purpose. It cannot afford to. When you see a brain that large, there is only one reasonable question. What is it for? Here is part of what we know it's for. Sperm whales live in matrilineal family groups organized around grandmothers, mothers, daughters, and sisters with relationships persisting across decades. The elder females are the repositories of irreplaceable knowledge, migration routes, feeding grounds, social histories between family groups spanning ocean basins. This is not instinct, this is culture. Communication patterns vary between family groups, the way dialects vary between human communities separated by geography. The whale family off Dominica does not communicate the way the family 100 miles north does. The differences are not genetic, they are learned. They are transmitted through exactly the system that Project CETI is trying to decode. And when a matriarch dies, researchers have documented what follows. Calves that struggle, roots that fail, families that fragment, because that irreplaceable store of knowledge accumulated over 60 or 70 years of living in a changing ocean dies with her. There is no book, there is no recording, there is only language, and when the speaker is gone, the words go too. They also coordinate hunts in total darkness 3,000 feet down, under pressure that would kill an unprotected human instantly. One whale drives prey upward, another positions to intercept. Roles shift in real time. This is not instinct, this is communication-dependent coordination. This is teamwork in the most literal sense. So what are they talking about? Project CETI will tell you honestly. Nobody knows yet. The AI can map structure. It can catalog codas and track who speaks to whom and when. But meaning requires context, matching specific vocalizations to specific observed behaviors at scale. That database didn't exist before this project. It's being built right now off the coast of Dominica in the same waters where sperm whale families have been returning for generations. The machine that listens. Here's what building that database actually looks like, because it's not what you'd picture. Researchers attach advanced biologgers directly to whale bodies, suction cup devices recording high-fidelity audio while simultaneously tracking depth, temperature, movement, and GPS location. 3 synchronized microphones per tag, multiple tags across a single family group at the same time. The tags can distinguish individual animals and capture conversations happening across different bodies, moving through water in different directions at different depths in total darkness. Every coda matched against what the whale was doing at that exact moment. Who it was talking to, what was in the water around them, what depth, what conditions, what time of day. The AI doesn't just look for patterns in sound. It looks for patterns in sound plus context. And because researchers already know which whales are related, which are dominant, which calves belong to which mothers, the algorithm finds patterns that pure acoustic analysis would never detect. This sound followed that sound becomes this specific individual said this to that specific individual, and then this happened next. That is not signal analysis. That is the beginning of translation. And the team says, carefully, with the caution of scientists who know what is at stake, that it's working faster than they projected. What happens when we crack the code? In the 1960s, biologists Roger Payne and Scott McVeigh discovered that humpback whales sing complex, structured songs. Their research sparked the Save the Whales movement. Public awareness of whale intelligence drove the Marine Mammal Protection Act into law. Humpback and gray whale populations that had been on the edge of extinction began recovering. That was songs. Project CETI believes proving sperm whales have language, actual, structured, contextual, grammatical language, could trigger a shift of even greater magnitude. Because this time it wouldn't just be songs. It would be sentences. It would be proof that something out there has been thinking and remembering and talking to its family. And we have been sailing over them for centuries without a second thought, treating the ocean as an empty road. The legal implications are already being discussed in academic law journals, in anticipation of what Project CETI might find. If we can demonstrate that whales discuss ideas, make decisions, and maintain relationships through linguistic exchange, the question of legal personhood for cetaceans stops being science fiction. Scholars are asking right now whether the current legal framework governing our relationship with these animals, a framework built entirely on the assumption that they don't have language, can survive what this research is building toward. Here is what nobody wants to say out loud, but everyone in the field is thinking. If sperm whales have language, if they encode meaning, transmit culture, and discuss the conditions of their lives, then every commercial whaling operation in human history didn't just kill marine mammals. And every ship strike on a cargo route through their habitat isn't just a wildlife accident. The entire moral architecture of how we have treated these animals was built on the assumption that they had nothing worth saying. Project CETI is dismantling that assumption, one recording at a time. What they might be saying here is the question that researchers return to when the data stops and the silence starts. The one they don't publish in papers, but ask each other after long days on the research vessel, watching the water for the V-shaped blow. Sperm whales have been on this planet 60 times longer than modern humans. They have been communicating in this structured, complex, contextually sensitive system for millions of years before a single human existed to hear it. They were here before our ancestors walked upright, before the continents settled into their current positions. They have watched the oceans change in ways that dwarf anything in human recorded history. And they have watched the most recent change, the one we caused, unfold faster than any shift in the millions of years they've been listening. They have watched species disappear from the waters they hunt. They have watched noise levels rise as industrial shipping expanded, the constant low-frequency roar of propellers disrupting their communication across hundreds of miles, the way a jackhammer disrupts a conversation in a quiet room, except the room is an entire ocean basin and the jackhammer never stops. They have watched the chemical composition of their environment shift as carbon dioxide dissolves into seawater and the pH drops. They have navigated increasingly frequent collisions with cargo ships on routes that didn't exist a century ago, collisions that kill animals who have no evolutionary framework for a 2,000-ton steel object moving at 20 knots through their habitat. What have they been saying to each other about all of it? The alphabet has been found, the vowels identified, the structure mapped by algorithms trained on 9,000 recordings and refined by the best minds in linguistics, cryptography, and artificial intelligence, working together on a problem that none of their individual fields could have solved alone. But meaning is still locked inside the dark water. When Project CETI finally cracks the code, and the researchers who have spent years building this believe it is when, not if, what will the first translated sentence contain? A mother describing a hunting ground to her daughter, the same ground her grandmother described to her. Knowledge that cannot be written down, that survives only through language, passed across generations in a system that was ancient before humanity existed. A grandmother transmitting a migration route that has fed the family for 40 years. A route she learned from her grandmother, who learned it from hers. A chain of memory stretching back through time in ways we can barely imagine. A warning about something new moving in the water above, or something none of us have thought to anticipate, because we spent so long assuming we were the only ones with things worth saying that we never seriously considered what everyone else might have been saying in our absence. The AI is still listening. The whales are still talking. And somewhere in the 9,000 recordings already processed, and the thousands more being gathered right now off the coast of Dominica, the first complete meaning is waiting to be found. Here is the question I want to leave you with, not a rhetorical one, a real one. If tomorrow, Project CETI announces that they have translated the first complete sperm whale sentence, that they know with scientific certainty what one whale said to another, what do you hope it says? Because when the translation finally comes, it will not just be a scientific discovery, it will be a reckoning. The moment humanity realizes it has had neighbors all along, neighbors with language, with memory, with culture, with the largest brains on Earth, and millions of years of accumulated experience in a changing ocean. Neighbors we spent centuries hunting nearly to extinction without once stopping to ask what they thought about it. We may be about to find out. If you want to be here when that moment arrives, subscribe. Because when the first whale sentence is decoded, this is where you'll hear it first.